this could be over here in my life. And when you start to look at it from that issue now, you will see how some being impacted. Here's this bring to the how does this social issue, this one social issue, impact us either directly, indirectly, or subliminally. And then now, if you look at it, as I said, from the context of your own life, just think about it. What other issues that you have in your life that's being directly impacted or subliminally impacted or indirectly impacted? Because at the end of the day, when we understand one context, we can now apply it to something else and help us in that area, which one of our shows that we did around this context, I remember me breaking down the context around ping pong. And this was one of the things that I used to understand the process of bullying. I understand the ping pong from something that I used to play, and I'm well versed in understanding how the game is played. And at one point, I started to see the similar correlation with the context of ping pong and bullying. So when I understood that now, I was able to apply, wow, so you're saying there's a player over here and there's a player over here. And I started to associate them now. Oh, this is the bully and this is the victim. And then what happened now when you talk about serving, so the bully serve us something over and it has to go over the net in order for it to impact the victim. So when I started to understand those correlations now, that's how I was able to understand the concept of bullying, and now started to break it down where I'm finding different solutions that could help me because I understand the concept of ping pong. And that is the same thing that I'm saying right now. This may not be something that's directly involved in your life, this topic, but there's something that you can learn from this platform where you take it and then you apply it over into your own platform of where something else like this exists. So let's look at this now as an impact where we're saying bullying is an impact from a social standpoint. Let's put away bullying. Let's look in your life. What's the social impact that's actually impacting you? So when you look at that now, it's the same concept of what happens with our bullying. For instance, we talked about a solution. One of the solutions that we talked about with the context of bullying was if you don't understand what it is, then you find an expert. And it's the same thing with any other social issue. If you're dealing with a social issue and you don't understand it, then go find an expert and bring that expert in to help you address that social issue. So what I'm saying is, even though we're talking about the context of bullying, and this may not be something that's directly impacting you, you have to understand it from a context. Oh, if I understood what's going on here, then I could apply something else and bring it over here. And this will now help us to understand what is it that we're going through. Because one thing that I saw with all the different social issues that are being offered in the community, it's like it's the same thing, but just being presented in a different package. Like all of these social issues, they're coming from an emotional standpoint. Like something happened in this person's life and it built up to the point where this happens. And now this now becomes a social issue in the person's life. And then the person now starts to project it outward onto others. That's the same concept of a bully. At least today's concept of what is considered a bully. So when I looked at that, I'm like, wow, all these social issues, they're tied together. But what happened, we have been now placed in a box where we're separating them. Oh, this has nothing to do with this. They're all tied together. And if we understand one of them, then we can understand the rest of them. Like even today, what's going on with the vaccine and the pandemic. The way I understand this concept, is by me understanding how does this earth runs. What is the concept of this world, right? And when you're talking about the world, you're talking about not just saying the earth, you're talking about all the different planets and stuff like that. So when I looked at that, now I started to understand certain things about the different planets, and then also understanding now what happens here on earth. And then when I started to look at that, now I started to make sense of certain things that's going on as we go through the pandemic. And because of that, now it's like I understand certain things, and it's like I put certain things in my life based on my understanding, not of what's going on with the pandemic, but because I understand something else. And now I saw the correlation. So when I looked at that, I was like, wow, this is easy for us to understand, that if you understand something from something else, then you can translate it over into what is it that you don't understand. And it helps you to bridge the gap of understanding what is it that you don't understand. So this is something that's quite interesting. And even though we're on the topic of bullying, it is something that we can say, you know what, you can learn from this, even though it's not directly a part of your path. So this is something that we wanted to come on here and share with you guys. And as I said, it's a platform where we're hoping to take a topic and bring it to a whole new destination. So if you're out there and you're interested in having a conversation with us, you can actually call in. Our phone number is 267-704-9294. Once again, 267-704-9294. And you can also join us on any one of our platforms on a weekly basis, where it's our YouTube channel, where it's the Airport Adventure, or LinkedIn page where it's Glory Young, or on our Twitch page where it's the Airport Adventure, and on Facebook you can join us live on Cleus Young. So these are different platforms that we made available, where even if you're interested in chatting with us on the chat line, you can go to our YouTube channel and you're able to communicate with us on there as well. So we have established this platform where we're saying we're bringing a topic or a person on this platform, where we're saying not only just what we can share, but what others could share as well could help us to bring the topic to a whole new destination. Because what I realize in life is, like, if we're not coming together and helping each other in what is it that's causing us to be challenged, then what's going to happen is where we're saying, oh, that person over there, that person deal with their own challenge because I got mine. But at the end of the day, it's either directly or indirectly or subliminally impacting us. So the more we're able to come together and saying, you know what, hey, what is it that you're over there challenged with? I may know something over here that could help you in that challenge. And when you're able to do that now, then what happens now, we're able to help each other to go to the whole new destination. So this is a platform, again, where we're coming on here and we're bringing certain topics or certain individuals to come on here and have a interview. But at the same time, what we're looking at, we're saying, let us bring it to a whole new destination. Like, I understand the context where we just come on and we just talk about certain things, and it's like, let's talk about it and let's get rid of it and move on to the next topic. For us, we wanted to do this show a little bit different, and this is why we've been doing it in the series, where each week we're highlighting something else. Like the week before that, we were talking about the impact. The week before that, we were talking about the history. So all these different components of where we're understanding it from a different angle, then you get you to have a better understanding of it overall. So when we looked at that, it's like, hey, we're not just going to come on here and just talk about bullying for 1 week. Like, when you talk about the mass amount of information that's around this one social issue, like, it can't be done in one show. And even though we're doing it in a series, like, there's certain things that we can cover because it's such an extensive amount of information that's out there. Like even one point, I've never shared any statistics around this context as yet. And it's like, that would be a whole nother show, that if we have to sit down here and talk about all the statistics that's out there that's related to the show, that's a whole new show that we would have to create. So I'm saying, like, all these different topics that we have brought so far within the context of the overarch topic, like we looked at it that, hey, we can't just dissect this in one show. So this is how we set up the platform, that each week we come on here and we talk about it from a different angle, and hoping that once we're giving you all these different angles, then you're able to see it from a whole different standpoint. And if you're able to see something from a whole different standpoint, then you can actually go to a whole new destination with it. So that is the contingency of how we're operating. We're bringing someone or something to the platform, and we're going to have a series of discussion around it from different angles, and hoping that once we're sharing these different angles, then we can now help you to understand it in a way that you have never understood it before. And this will now help you to go to a whole new destination with it. So one of the things I want to do today, as we're getting ready to wrap up, and we're talking about the impact, the visual impact, the auditory impact, right? Look at it from the standpoint where once you're seeing something in society, it's like it starts to impact you some way, shape, or form. It's only a matter of time before you have seen it so much that it now starts to play out visually, from a visual standpoint to now a physical standpoint in your life. And it's the same thing with the audio standpoint. As I said earlier, you can be listening to a song over and over again on the radio, and before you know it, one day you just start singing the song because it has auditorily impact you from certain level to now where you're physically now singing the song. So this is something that we were looking at. And as I said, the other aspect was the subliminal approach, where things are placed in society, and from a subliminal standpoint, they impact us day by day, and we don't even know why is it that we're doing these things. And it's from a subliminal standpoint of how they're impacting us. So what I want to do real quick, and I'll talk about this, is the final step. If you can see on the screen right here, this is an apple. And this is an experiment that I normally do when we were actually bringing the different components of the process of bullying to either a school, a church, or different parts in the community. So we used to do what is called the apple experiment. And we used to show people how it really impacts someone when that person is bullied. So for instance, if I took a bite out of this apple, right? And as you can see, this is what happens when a bully bullies a victim. They take a bite out of them. And the experiment that we normally show, it's called the Band-Aid experiment, where we would actually put a physical Band-Aid on this apple now and show you the impact. That once that apple is bitten, right, there's no way to really bring it back to its normal state. Like even if I put a Band-Aid on it, it won't actually bring it back to the original state the apple was in. So when we looked at that, we were saying that's the same thing. Once you bully someone, you can't bring back the person to that normal state. And then this is what we looked at now, where we're saying now, what would happen with this apple, right? If it's bitten and it's not addressed. So you would have the apple where day by day now, it will go into a state where it starts to break down. And it starts to break down to the point where it will become rotten. And we looked at that from the contingency of saying that's the same thing that happens to a victim. The impact of that now when a person is bullied, if this is not addressed to the victim, it will get to a point where the victim breaks down and starts to become rotten, in the sense of where a lot of people, children who have been bullied, all right, they go to the state of what is called suicide. So we highlighted that as something that it's the same context of the apple. If that apple is bitten and you don't put it, say, like in the refrigerator, like you just left it out like that and not attend to it, then eventually you're going to see how that begins to break down and it starts to lead to a point where it becomes rotten. For us now is understanding that context, and this is why I'm saying, even though this is an apple, it still relates to the context of bullying, because if a person is bullied, especially severely, and that person who is considered the victim is not looked upon, then what happens to that person? That person starts to break down to the point where that person is come into the state of what is called the rotten state. And the rotten state is so ironic, right? Because majority of the suicide that actually goes on with the children, it's almost like in the home. So here's it that the child is home and the parent is not able to see any of the signs that the child was bullied, or the child is going through what is called the rotten stage. And it's the point where that parent either come home or go to the child's room, and then all of a sudden they're seeing a dead body, meaning that the child committed suicide. And it's like looking at it from that same correlation of the apple. This is what happens to someone when someone is impacted from a standpoint where they're bullied. And if someone doesn't address that issue with the victim, then what happens? That person is going to eventually go into that dead zone where eventually this person may look at committing suicide. And let us now break away from the context of bullying, because this applies to any social issue. If you go out there and you actually beat up this young woman in a relationship, say domestic abuse, and you continuously beat up on her, or vice versa, because women do it as well. And if that victim doesn't get any attention where these things are being addressed, the person could actually go into that mode of suicide as well. So it's not just around the context of bullying, but it's also now when someone has been severely impacted by something, if that person is not addressed in a manner, then that person could now lead to the point where, from an emotional standpoint, that person starts to break down. And then now these are the realities that the person is going to see. The reality of seeing it where, hey, I need to take myself out of this circumstance. So when I looked at that, I'm like, you know what? It's an apple that we use to do what is called the Band-Aid experiment, but it's a Band-Aid experiment where we're able to emphasize the impact of how when someone is bitten, as we would call it, or bullied, there's no way to take it back. You cannot bring back that person to the right state of mind where they will just ignore it. And as I said, from a visual standpoint, from an auditory standpoint, or from a subliminal standpoint, we can be impacted. And this is one of the impact. Once that person is bullied from a level, then there's no turning back. You can't bring back the person to a normal state. It's almost like saying that this person have to learn how to cope with what was done to the person, but there's no erasing of the person's memory of this happening. So it continues to play out in the person's life. If this person doesn't get the attention to help to cope with what was done, then this person may lead into that state of what the apple would normally do, and the apple would normally go into a rotten state. And from a rotten state, this is where it's actually going back to the earth to replenish and come back again. And that's the same context now when you look at it. When someone commits suicide, it's like they're going back to the earth because now they have died. So it's the same context of what we look at whether we're dealing with bullying or dealing with different social issues, for us to understand what's really going on in different contexts, we have to learn how to understand different things. And when we understand different things, now we can apply them to the things that we don't understand. Because at the end of the day, everything is interrelated and intercorrelated. So everything can correlate from one angle to another, and everything is interrelated, either from a direct standpoint, indirect standpoint, or what I would call the subliminal standpoint. So once again, I want to thank everyone who joined us today or will see the replay of this topic as we talked about the impact of bullying. I'm your host, Cleus Glory Young on the RunWay. And I just want to say thank you guys for out there who are listening and tuning in and getting something out of it. Until next week's show, we'll see you once again. God bless.